Okay, so if you saw the message, give another minute. We're going to pick up on Kuf Ches because I realized there's a couple of Gemaras at the end of the Amud that we did not do and we really should have done. Okay, so Kuf Ches, Amud Beis, that was all of the Gemaras. We're still in the Bar Metzra. The Gemara transitioned a little bit. I'll just give another minute. But if you remember, I'm apologizing in advance. I have a bit of a cold, but I'll be okay. So the Gemara started with Bar Metzra, right? And who has the rights to Bar Metzra and how you get them or lose them. And then the Gemara transitioned into priorities of who you should sell to. Talmud Chacham, a neighbor, a person comes with cash, then the Bar Metzra could lose out, okay? And then the Gemara goes back to the issues of Bar Metzra. And we're going to pick it up with let's say okay, so we talked about right before it got wide, we talked about the guy who says I'm going to go get money. So if the buyer comes with cash and the bar mitzvah says I need a week to put the money together, he loses. But if he says, okay, I'm going home to get the cash and I'm coming right back, the Gemara said we have to see if he's really capable of doing it or he's just stalling. That was the last line before it got wide. Ezel va'atrach va'aisi zuze. I'm 4 lines before it gets wide. Ezel va'atrich va'aisi zuze lo natrin le. We don't wait for him. But Amar Ezel Isi Zuze, not Etrach va'aisi, but I'm going to get the money. So then Chazinani Gavr da Amidhu da Azilu Maisi Zuze natrin le. If we see that he is a man of means and he could just go get the money, right? He can go to the ATM and pull out the money. Then we wait for him. But if we sense that he's just stalling, because I don't see how this guy's going to come back in a day, he's not going to come back tomorrow with $100,000. Then we don't wait. Now, okay, here's where we saw sections in the Tosfos Rita. We really didn't do the Gemara, and we must. And we're back to priorities in who you sell to. All right, and again, when we talk about who you sell to, we're really talking about who has a rights of bar mitzvah and who doesn't. So ara dechad ubate dechad. What's the scenario? We touched on it in the Tosfos Rita. I realize we have to see it inside. So if you look in the Rashi, okay, Rashi says it's 2, 4, 6, 7 lines up. I'm sorry, the Rashi's already telling me the din. So in those days, somebody used to own the land. All right, I mean, I think even today you have this real estate thing, right, where somebody owns the land and somebody else builds a building on top of the land, and the deal always is that the owner of the house who built the house, he has rights there for a certain amount of time, and then he has to leave. So, okay, Ephraim, do we have such? How does that work these days?
Sure, it's a land lease.
Ground lease.
It's very common.
A land lease. Okay, fine. So Reuven owns the land, and Shimon builds a house on the land. Okay, and now Mori Ara Me'akev Amari Bati. The owner of the house wants to sell the house to a third party. The owner of the land can demand that he be the one that it gets sold to. Meaning he has a right of bar metzra, and he can demand that the owner of the house sell to him, which really means that if the owner of the house ignores him and sells to a third party, then the owner of the land can come and activate bar metzra on the buyer of the house. However, Mare Bati lo ma'akev amari ara. But if the owner of the land wants to sell the land to somebody else, the owner of the house can't say, I have rights to buy the land. Ephraim's nodding. Does that make sense? Is that how it would work in a land lease?
Yeah, that makes sense. Except that there is a concept of selling the building for the remainder of the term of the land lease. So you're selling a land lease, not an ownership.
Okay, so according to this Gemara, the owner of the land would have the first rights to buy the land lease.
It's usually the case.
Okay, but if the owner of the land wants to sell the land, the guy who has the land lease has no rights. Hey, he does not have first refusal rights to buy the land.
No, generally not.
Okay, the Seder, so that's good. The lines. Let's see Rashi. Mori ara me'akev amari bate. What does it mean, ma'akev? What does it mean he can prevent him from selling? Doesn't mean he can prevent him from selling. What it means is, shalolim kor habinyan le'acher. he can prevent the owner of the house, or in our case, what we call the land lease, he can prevent the owner of the land lease from selling the lease to a stranger. Why? He's coming to sell the house, and the owner of the land certainly needs it. Okay, again, it sounds to me like the case there is not really a land lease, but it's real 100% ownership of the house. But it doesn't matter, because the idea is that the owner of the land certainly wants to own a house that's on his land. However, Mori Bati, I'm still in Rashi, but Mori Bati lo ma'akiv amori ara. He can't stop the owner of the land from selling to a third party. Shuhu eno chashuv shachein. He's not called a neighbor. So I see it is a land lease. It's a perfect land lease. Okay, and therefore he cannot stop the owner of the land from selling to a third party. Okay, but now another interesting halacha. Where is it here? Loma. Okay, Amri. I'm sorry. Loma. Where am I up here? Amari Bakti Loma Akev Amari Ara. Okay, now Ara dechad, the dikli dechad. So Reuben owns the land, and on the land are palm trees, and he sold basically sold the palm trees for X number of years, so that the owner of the palm trees can get all the dates over these. But it's a sale for years, and at the end of the years, or if the palm trees die in the middle, the owner of the palm trees has no rights in the land. Morida. So then again, it makes sense. Morida Ara Motzi Ma'akev Amari Dikli. If the owner of the palm trees wants to sell the palm trees, the owner of the land has first refusal rights. But Mori Dikli Lo Motzi Ma'akev Amari Ara. The owner of the palm trees can't stop the owner of the land from selling the land. Says Rashi, the dikli dechat shemachar lo diklin besadehu lanichan sham ad zman ploni o ad sheyavshu. What did the buyer of the palm trees buy? He bought X number of years of crops, or until the palm trees die. Next, here's a very interesting halacha.
So, Rabbi,
yeah.
So just to summarize, make it clear for me, please. Basically, the landowner has the upper hand in both these cases.
Compared to a neighbor, even if the neighbor's a bar mitzvah. Yes.
Compared to a Mr. Bar Mitzvah?
Even a Mr. Bar Mitzvah, because the owner of the land is considered much more a Bar Mitzvah than a guy who has adjacency.
We're talking in reference to getting the house or getting the fruit.
So again, if the owner of the land wants to sell the land to a stranger, the owner of the house doesn't have rights of Bar Mitzvah, even though he's sitting on the land. In other words, the owner of the land can sell to a stranger. He doesn't have to sell to the owner of the house. But the owner of the house, if the owner of the house comes to sell, he must sell to the owner of the land, and he can't sell to a stranger. Yes. Okay.
Even if the stranger is going to offer him a much better price.
Okay. Again, any time
that's
this din comes at the expense of the seller, then the seller is not required. The seller doesn't lose because of a din of bar mitzvah.
Yeah, but this case seems to be mahuti different.
No.
Because my house is on your land.
Yes, but if you want to, so you're the owner of the land, right? You're the owner of the land. I'm the owner of the house. I want to sell the house. Okay. So Dan Ritz is going to offer me $100,000, and you're going to offer me $90,000.
You're going to sell to Dan Ritz.
Exactly. Even though the house is on your land, it's only when we're offering the same price that I have to sell to you and not to Dan. That again, you guys got to. This is going to be very important. All of the bar mitzvah, because it's coming from V'asisha Yosher V'atov, and maybe this will be an opportunity for me to remind you another thing. This is a unique situation where we legislate and make the din that you have to go lifnim mishuras hadin. Please don't look at Asisha Yosher V'atov as din. It's lifnim mishuras hadin. But we're going to have cases, this is one of them, Bar Mitzvah is one of them, where Chazal legislated go lifni mishur sadid. It's almost an oxymoron. We're going to have it when we get to Chav Daled. We're going to see exactly the same idea of a legislation to go lifni mishur sadid. But again, understand you're making the din that you have to go lifnim mishur sadin, but don't lose sight that it's lifnim mishur sadin, and that's going to have ramifications. We'll see on Chav Dalet. Okay, now here's another one. There's a field. Is it here? Yeah. Okay. Ara lebate the ara lezara. There's a field for sale. There's a field for sale. One person wants to build a house on the field, and one person wants to use the field for agricultural purposes, and will add in a sharper element. And the one who wants to use it for agricultural purposes is the bar metzra. And the one who wants to build a house, obviously, is not a bar metzra. He wants to buy the land to build a house. Okay? So says Rashi, Ara Lezore. It's 2, 4, 5 lines from the bottom, the last words on the line. Ara Lezora, Hametzran Chafetz Bo Lizriya, the Halokeach Tzorich Lo Lebinyan Abayis. The buyer is a homeless guy, and he put together the money to buy a piece of land so that he can build a house. And the adjacent guy is an agriculture. He wants the field to expand his agricultural activities. Look what the Gemara says. Ara lebate va'ara lezara yishuv adif the lesba mishum dina de bar metzra. Says Rashi, yishuv de bati adif. The idea of living quarters. Right, adif lebeitin velo tiknu kan asot yasher v'atov shezu tova mizu. What's better, to have an adjacent field or to have a house to live in? What's better? We say having a house to live in is more important than having adjacent agriculture. Okay, again, you see we've got to weigh all of the issues.
It's funny that we say this because in the whole scenarios you've been saying when we cover this that everyone has opportunities to go somewhere else and buy, right? So the buyer who wants to build a house, the way we understand this is he could go somewhere else and get an equally good plot of land and buy a house somewhere else. So it's not like we're providing for a homeless person to have a place to live. We're just saying he gets priority.
Absolutely. That's exactly how we balance Asisa Yosher V'Hatov. We have to balance the Tov of one person against the Tov of the other person. And apparently we'll see a little bit in when we get to the Tosfos read how this plays out Lamaisa. But you see here that there is an advantage to living rather than agriculture. That's what it says. So read that Rashi again. Very important Rashi. Let me just see what the Bach did here. Hey. Yeah. Yishuv debate adif. Wait, what's that? Hey? Yishuv debate adif. Oh, I see. He's saying like this. He's not a run-on. Yishuv bate de adif. Beit din lo tiknu kan asot hayosher v'tov. Remember, all of this din of the bar metzra is a takana. Again, I emphasize one more time. We are creating a din that you have to go lifnim mishur sadin. The minute you don't have a legislated, you have to do yosher v'tov, then the seller can sell to whoever he wants. And here what we are saying is that the tov is that there should be dwelling places. It sounds to me from the Rashi that, well, it's a little bit, we'll see it maybe in the Rishonim still. Does it mean that the owner, the guy who wants to build the house has preference, or there's no preference? It's equal. Remember, if we don't apply Vasisa Yosher V'Hatov, you're selling a piece of property, okay? And there's no bar metzras. And somebody comes to buy your property. And they're both offering the same price. Who do you sell to?
Whoever you want.
Whoever you want. So it's not clear from this Rashi whether what we're saying when the bar metzra wants for agriculture, but he's a bar metzra, and a homeless wants for a house, are we saying there's no din of Yosher V'Tov here because it's all else equal and he can sell to whomever he wants? It sounds to me like that's what the Rashi says. Because when Rashi says, Lo tiknu kan as osos Yosher V'Tov, there's no takana of Yosher V'Tov. Shizu tova mizu. Meaning we didn't make a takana that one is better than the other. Each one has an advantage. And that, Dan, I think will explain answer your question. That's certainly what it sounds like from Rashi. There's no advantage. Once there's no advantage, then the rabbis don't mix in. The rabbis don't mix in.
Thank you.
Okay.
So if the rabbis don't mix in, what is the underpinning of the preference of the person who wants to build the house versus the Metzron who is a farmer?
There isn't. There's no
But that's
preference. According to Rashi, there's no preference. Meaning, what does it mean when there's no preference?
well, but the Gemara says Yishuv Adif.
Yishuv Adif, and that's exactly why you have Rashi. That Yishuv Adif, so that equalizes and neutralizes the Beis Din mixing in. That's the Rashi. If you learn the Gemara without Rashi, it would sound like the guy who wants to build a house has preference. But then we get to Dan's question, and therefore I believe, according to Rashi, we'll see other Rishonim yet. But according to Rashi, it sounds like, read the words of Rashi. Yishuv Bati Adif means Beitin lo tiknu kan asos yosher v'tov shazu tova mizu. They didn't say that one is better than the other. And again, there is an idea that the bar metzra is really the power, because that's what we've been talking all along. But there is something to neutralize that, i.e., need a house, I need living quarters. And therefore, the rabbis didn't give any preference to one or the other. That's according to Rashi. We're going to see in other Rishonim that they hold the opposite. That the conclusion is that the house wins. Not that the guy can sell to whoever he wants, but that the house guy wins.
In the scenario where the house guy wins, comparing houses and land for agriculture, what if the way the zoning worked, you can build a teeny tiny house or a massive farm?
Can't answer that question. That's why we have Batei Din, Efraim. That's why we have Batei Din. The situation has to come, and they're going to have to they have to learn all the sugyas. You know what? That's premature for us to even address that question until we see how the Rishonim deal with everything. But that's a very good question. That's how the Batei Din earn their keep. Exactly those kinds of questions. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So one last thing in the Gemara, because we need for the Tosas read. Where is it? Here's about it. The less mishum din de bar metzra. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll tell you where Rashi got it. Less mishum din de bar metzra. All right. Yishuv adif the less mishum din de bar metzra. Listen to the words. The words say there's no din of bar metzra. The minute there's no din of bar metzra, to me that says, like Rashi learned, that the seller can sell to whoever he wants. When it says that Yishuv adif means it's strong so that it can neutralize and be equal to consider to bar metzra. Let's go to the last din. Afsik mishunisa o rechiva de dikla. Mishunisa are rocks. Rechiva de dikla is a row of palm trees. What does it mean, afsik? So Reuven has a field, okay? And the adjacent field of Shimon is not 100% adjacent. There's rocks in the middle. So now remember, what's the whole taina of Shimon? What's the whole taina of Shimon? What's the whole taina of Reuven, who has the field, to be able to buy Shimon's field, which is adjacent? I want to have a smooth plowing ability. But if there's rocks in the middle, so then that may block the plowing ability, or if there's palm trees. So what do we do when there are rocks in the middle? It says chazina, we see. Let's see. Depends. If there's enough space in Shimon's field for Reuven to be able to plant one furrow of vegetables before he hits the rocks or the trees, meaning they're trees, but there's open land really adjacent. How much land has to be adjacent to Reuven to allow Reuven to buy the whole field? Enough to plant one furrow. So then we say that he has a din of the bar metzra. Ve'ilo les ba meshuma de bar metzra. Okay? In other words, he's got to be able to demonstrate some kind of a tangible advantage and not just say, well, I'd like it to be convenient for me to have it. And that's going to be a very important halacha, whether convenience is enough to activate din of the bar metzra, or no, there has to be something tangible, the ability to actually plow more of your field. That's going to also come up in the Rishonim. And the last one, which is not so relevant to us, but I think it makes perfect sense. The Hani Dala Dini de Bar Metzra. The field is surrounded by 4 Bar Metzra. And all 4 of them want to buy. All 4 of them want to buy. Who gets to buy the first one? All right, Dekadim Chad Minayu Vizavin Zvine Zvini. First one, it's first come, first serve. But what happens if they come all together? What happens if all 4 of them come together? All 4 of the Bari Metzra want to buy the field. So we split it in triangles, and everyone gets a triangle that's closest to him. which again, that would sort of make sense. Okay. Yeah. All right. So that's what we needed to see. Now let's go back. If you will, pull out the sheets. Pull out the sheets, and we're going to go back now to the Tosfos read on Kuf Ches Amud Aleph. So there's two things. There's Tosfos read and there's Piskei read. I don't remember. Did we do the Tosfos read and the Piskei read, or we just started the Tosfos read?
We did the Tosfos.
We finished the whole Tosfos read?
I don't think so. No, I think
no. We did. We definitely didn't. Let's start it again from the beginning, because now that we saw this Gemara, it'll make a lot more sense.
We got 3/4 through.
Okay. Let's just quickly say the first part, and then the Tosfos read argues. Okay. Now, we'll pick it up with
Reiti Kasuf LeRabbeinu Tam. That's where you really started.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm looking for. No, wait. Are you in the Piskei read or the Tosfos read?
Tosfos read, and in the middle of the first line, Reiti Kasuf.
Yes, right. Okay, that's where we're going to pick it up. Right. Reiti Kasuf LeRabbeinu Tam shepasuk de'ein din mitzonos ela besados v'lo bebati. Shekol halacha eina mayri ela besados u'mishum taima de machrisha. Only because of the expansion of the plowing. The dafka sodas the shchichi lemizban amrina lelokech vasisa yashavat. It also has to be the kinds of fields that are easily available. You'll notice he's alluding to the fact that if there's something unique about this field that isn't just easily available somewhere else, then again, there's no dinner de bar mitzvah. Aval bati de lo shchichi lemizban. But houses, you can't say, take your money and go buy a house somewhere else. That wasn't so common that houses are so easily available. Okay, the lo ovidin is dizavin dirte. People didn't sell their houses so often, okay, as they sold their agricultural fields, because they needed a place to live. Lo amrinim behu vasisa yasher v'atov, and therefore we don't say bar mitzvah on houses. And if the buyer gets there first and he wants to buy, and he buys before the bar mitzvah gets there for the house, then you can't get rid of him. Again, this is going to be very relevant in houses and apartments, etc., etc. Okay, v'im isa de b'chol mili isbu dinner de bar mitzvah. If you want to say that there's always bar mitzvah, well, what justification could there be for bar mitzvah in houses? Only convenience. It's convenient. I'd like to have a house next to my house. I'd like to have a guest house next to my house. Then ki ifsek mishumta v'rechiva dedikli my havi. Why should the rocks that prevent contiguous plowing make a difference? He should be allowed to say, "Look, I want convenience. I want a field next to my field." Right? V'tepikle mishum mishunisa v'rechiva dedikli gufayu elavare ein din de bar mitzvah no yigel b'sara bilchud. And he wants to prove that from the fact that even rocks that prevent plowing can prevent a din de bar mitzvah. Dinner of bar mitzvah can be prevented by the inability to plow, so you have to have the claim, I want to be able to plow straight. Says the Tosfos read, Eino nirali. He doesn't agree. The hashta b'shchinus sade kap de inish, v'amrinin b'hu v'asisi yasher v'atov. People want adjacency. Even if they can't plow, the fact that they have one field next to the other is still an advantage. Kol shekain b'shchinus batim. If we say it by fields, well, certainly we should say it by batim. The Amrinan tov shachin krov me'achrocho. It's much better for me to have another house right next door that I can put my kids or my expand, whatever it is. It's certainly an advantage of shchinut, of adjacency in the house. You'll say the guy wants to buy the house that's adjacent. Again, we have Reuben with a house, Shimon selling his house next door. And Levi wants to buy it. And we say to Levi, go buy somewhere else. And he said, because you can find another house. No, ain't a taina. Now we go back to that. What did we say when we said that the land belongs to Reuven and the house belongs to Shimon? Amrinan, Mari Aramatzila Akev Amori Beta. The owner of the land can insist that the owner of the house sell to him, and we push off Levi, who wants to buy the house. Wait a minute, what are we telling Levi? Go find a house somewhere else. Why can't Levi make a taina? I can't find another house. So you see that the fact that it's not so shiach to find houses, you'll find another house. The Tosfos Reed wants to show from the fact that the owner of the land can push off Levi, who wants to buy the house, because the owner of the land is the bar mitzvah of the house. So therefore, there should be a din of bar mitzvah on neighboring houses also. We don't say, oh, I can't find another house. So, the Tosfos Reed is extending very sharply the din of bar mitzvah. He's applying it in a much broader sense than we've seen till now. I wanted to bring a raya that if there's rocks in the middle, we don't allow bar mitzvah on that field. You have use. Again, the fact that the rocks stop you using the field the way you want to. But a house, an adjacent house, is always extra use. That's really not the use. It's not good enough to activate bar mitzvah, again, because of convenience. The ayin mashakasafti al zabetchuvas tezvav. The hachi amrin nardoy mishmeder Rav Nachman ein ona lekarkos. Okay, yeah. All right. Let's skip. That's just going on. Who says what? Let's go to the Piskei Harit. Now we have that was the Tosfos the parish in the Gemara. Now let's see his psak halacha. Okay.
So his bottom line is basically that there's a din bar mitzvah also on houses.
Let's see his bottom line in Piskei Harit. But yes, the answer is correct. Yes, according to the Tosfos Reed. When we get to the Shulchan Aruch, we're gonna see that it's a big machlokas. Amar Rav Yehuda Haiman. Let's see the Piskei Harit.
What was his argument about the buck in here?
No, his argument is that why shouldn't there be a din of bar mitzvah on houses? His argument is very simple. Why not? Why shouldn't there be the same asisa yasher v'atov when the neighbor wants to buy your house than if he wants to buy your field? Why not? From the Gemara, it sounds like, again, one of his proofs is from the guy who owns the land, and he wants to buy the house that's on his land. So we say he has first rights to the house.
Right.
The guy coming, Levi wants to buy the house also, and he may not be able to find another house. That's not a taina. That's not a taina. You see, it's not a taina. Okay, let's see the psak. It'll become clear in the Piskei Harit. Okay, so Amar Rabbi Yehuda Haman da'achzik beini. He's going to quote the Gemara. Let's run through the Gemara quickly. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Haman da'achzik beini achi beini shufi chtzifa havei v'sliki lebes alkinale. Rav Nachman Amar Rav Nachman alo misalkinale. Rav Nachman Amar yes misalkinale because it's chutzpah. Pirush kana karka beinehem. V'imishum din bar metzra. But if their claim is we were adjacent, lo misalkinale. We don't kick him out. In other words, if he bought it among shutfim or brothers, we kick him out. That's chutzpah. That's enough to get rid of him, but not because bar mitzvah is not enough. Imeinan lo achim v'lo shutfim v'kana karka somach lemeitzer shalo ubar metzar omer lo za karka shu somach li ani rotze liknoso. The bar mitzvah says, "Hey, you bought it. I want to buy it." Ein misalkinan oso. The Nardoy Amre, again, so it sounds like Rav Nachman, again, he's making it sound like Rav Nachman doesn't even allow bar metzra with a purchase, which is a little bit of a problem. The Nardoy Amre afilu mishum din bar metzra, misalkinan also mishum shenemar vasisa yasher vatov, be'enei Hashem elokecha. So it's very clear Nardoy holds bar metzra on a purchase, even on a purchase, just because of adjacency. Kosav Rabbeinu Tam, Ein din mitzranus ela besados v'lo bebatim. That's the Rabbeinu Tam that we saw in the Tosfos Reed. Shekol halacha eina miyare eino myra ela besados umishum taime demachrisha. Says Rabbeinu Tam, the only reason we allow, remember, you've got to know what the default is. Shimon is selling his field. Reuven is a neighbor. Shimon should be able to sell to anybody who wants, and if Levi buys it, Levi, that's your tough luck, Reuven. That's your tough luck. If Shimon didn't want to sell to you, he sold to Levi. It's your problem. So we need a reason to allow Reuven to give Levi money and send him away, and that is machrisha. That's what Rabbeinu Tam is saying. He's saying, what's your default? Your default is there should be no such thing. No such thing as dinner de bar mitzvah. What is that supposed to mean? If Levi bought it, Levi bought it. Why are you kicking Levi out? So that's the default. Asisa Yasher Vatov moves you off the default. But the only place we see to move off the default in the Gemara is Machresha. So you don't make it more than Machresha, because that's all the Gemara talks about. And therefore, Rabbeinu Tam says it's only true by fields. Okay? She'ein dina de bars ele besados v'lo bebatim. Shekol halacha eina mayra ele besados. U'mishumtayim de machresha dafka besada d'shchiach lemizban. So now we're going to create another limitation. It's got to be the kind of a field that it's easily available. That Levi, he don't buy here, you buy there. But if it's something unique, again, we don't say, you can't tell them don't buy here, go buy there, because it's not available there. All right. I'm reading a little vasisa yasher vatov. Aval bebati de lo shchiach lemizban. The law of it inish dezavin dirte. People don't sell their houses so easily. It's not so easy to find another house. Lo amrinin behu vasisa yasher vatov. We can't tell Levi go find another house. The isa de bechol ilu isbuj mishum dinah de bar metzra. So then, and if we say no, adjacency is good enough. We don't make it right. You're just because you're next to it, you get to do whatever you want. Ki afsik mishunisa v'rechiva de dikle tepukle mishum mishunisa v'rechiva de dikle gufayu. So let him say, I want to buy. You know what? I want to buy the adjacent palm trees. I want the palm trees that's adjacent to me. All right, elavada ain't din bar metzra nohug ela b'sada biluchud, and it's got to be because of plowing. Okay, so that is the Rabbeinu Tam. Says the Tosas read. It says the Piskei HaReed. We saw the read in the Tosas. Now we see his Psak Halacha. Eino nirali dahashta b'shchenus sode kapdi inish the amrinan ve'asisa yasher v'hatov. Just because it's a good thing to have adjacency. Kol shekain b'shchenus batim the amrinan tov shachin karev me'avracha. What's more important? To have adjacency in a house or adjacency in a field? Says the Tosas read, adjacency in a house, that's much more important. I want to be able to expand. I want to be able to know who my neighbors are. I want to have control over my neighbors. A field, no. So you don't have so you can't plow so much. The imishum de lo shchiach le lokech beita lemizvan ein zutaina. The lokech can say, I can't find another house. The houses aren't so available. We allow the owner of the land to stop the owner of the house from selling to Levi, even though Levi can't find another house, because he's a bar metzora. He has more powerful rights. Ve'im isa lemalei lokeach lo shchiach li bata lemizman. Let Levi say, I can't find another house. We say the owner of the land can say, very sorry. All right, I have priority. Levi will get removed from the house that he bought from the owner of the house by the owner of the land. Okay, so he's rejecting Rabbeinu Tam. The proof of the rocks and the palm trees. You can't say I want to be adjacent to the palm tree. Okay, that doesn't allow you to activate dinah de bar metzra, and therefore the Tosas read, and we're going to see this l'maisa. Whether this is right now up to today, but batei din, pretty much you should know that batei din pretty much today do not activate dinah de bar metzra on apartments and houses. Okay, I mean, it's very common in Israel, right? My neighbor is selling his house. I'd love to buy the apartment. My neighbor's selling his apartment. I'd love to buy the apartment in order to expand my apartment. I can, again, if the price is equal, if I really want it, I got to offer more money. If somebody else is ready there, and the neighbor, remember, that obviously, if the neighbor doesn't want to sell to me, the neighbor wants to sell to somebody else. We're taking away, you've got to realize this, ultimately we're depriving the seller of selling to whom he wants to sell, because the buyer knows that if I buy it, I'm going to get kicked out. All right, so that we got to realize there's moving pieces here. Okay, so that's the end of the Tosfos read. I believe we saw the Tosfos Harosh.
Rabbi Karlinsky?
Yes.
Do you think that the read just said, and forgive me if this is obvious, but that he just said, you thought coming into this argument that actually the reason for plowing, that in the case of plowing where we apply bar metzra, that the reason for that was because plowing is like the most extreme example. And so all the other examples, you thought like house and other examples, we didn't apply the din of bar mitzvah because they weren't as extreme as plowing, right? Even rocks weren't as extreme as plowing. Comes the reed and he says, no, actually, that's not true. Actually, I'm telling you that houses are even more extreme.
I don't know if he has to say more extreme. What he's saying is it's equal. And again, because the reasoning is asisa yosher v'hatov, which is, again, I can't emphasize enough times that this is a legislated din to go lifnim mishuras hadin. And now the Tosas Reed is saying, the Reed is saying logically, it makes a lot of sense that we should legislate this in cases of adjacency in houses where it's good. Remember, at the end of the day, the question here is, what rights are we giving the buyer, and which ultimately falls back to the seller? Because remember, this is going to be a restriction on the ultimately it's a restriction on the seller, because the seller knows, right, that I'm not going to find a buyer if the buyer knows that he can get kicked out, and that's where the tension comes and plays in different directions. But let's see, we're going to see more. When we get to the Shulchan Aruch, we'll see how the post can deal with it. I want to go now to Chav Dalet. Okay, Chav Dalet is, again, an example of legislated asisa yosher v'hatov sometimes. Okay, trigger warning. Ephraim Reichman did not like the real conclusion of the Gemara in this Gemara, but it's paskin lahalacha, and therefore we're going to see how it works.
I will acquiesce, Rabbi Karlinsky.
So after so many years, you realize that you're in a different place today than you were so many years ago. Okay.
Where are we going now?
We're going to Chav Dalet Amud Beis. We're still in Bava Metzia.
Bava Metzia Chav Dalet.
Chav Dalet Amud Beis in the middle of the narrow lines. There's a little past the middle of the narrow lines. The first word on the line is D'Yisrael, but we need Rav Yehuda Havi Shapell. Rav Yehuda Havi Shapell v'Azil Batre de Mar Shmuel b'Shuka de Beit Daisa. Now, this is a Gemara after we talked about the fact that when you find that when you find something in a place where we assume that the owner was miyayesh, and why would we assume the owner is miyayesh? Because it's all goyim, and goyim don't have a din of Hashavas Aveda, and therefore, when you lost something, in a place that's populated by goyim who don't do Hashavas Aveda, then you're miyayesh, because you have how am I ever going to get it back? It's probably going to be found by a non-Jew, and if it's not clear that it belongs to a Jew, even if a Jew finds it, the Jew's allowed to keep it because he's allowed to assume that it was lost by a non-Jew for which there's no chiyuv of hashavas havei. So there are cases where you lose something even with a siman, and the finder is allowed to keep it because the assumption is that the owner was miyayesh. So here are two stories. So Rav Yehuda Avi Shapell v'Azil Batre de Mar Shmuel b'Shuka de Beit Daisa. He was following his Rebbe, okay, Mar Shmuel. He was following his Rebbe in the Shuka de Daisa, the meal market, which was owned and frequented mostly by goyim. Amar Le, so Rav Yehuda asked Mar Shmuel, Matzakan Arniki Mahu, Amar Le Arelu Shalo. You get to keep it. If after you took it home because you're allowed to keep it, Ba Yisrael v'Nasan b'Siman Mahu. What about if after I took it home, a Jew came and gave me a siman that it was his? Amar le chayv lahachzer. You got to give it back to him. Now, right away, the Gemara says, Tarti, that's a contradiction. Why is it a contradiction? Because if when a Jew gives a siman, you have to give it back, that means you should have been machriz when you found it. If you have to give it back, so then you can't keep it. If you can't keep it, you have to be machriz. So how could you say I'm allowed to keep it and I don't have to be machriz, but if a Jew comes and gives me a siman, I have to give it back to him? Tarti, that's a contradiction. Let's see Rashi. Till here, let's see Rashi. Debei daisa, shemochrim sham chitim ketushim l'daisa. They sell ground wheat for cereal to make oatmeal or a cream of wheat. V'rabi mitzuyin sham, and therefore the assumption is that he's miyayesh. So right away, so Rav Yehuda asked, "What's the din? Arei l'shalo." What happens if a Jew gives me a siman? You got to give it back. So he says, I tarti. Tarti means it's a contradiction. If I'm allowed to keep it, why do I have to give it back? Amar le lifnim mishur sadin. You're giving it back lifnim mishur sadin. Meaning, al pi din, you're allowed to keep it. The guy was miyayish. But we're telling you you're chayiv to give it back lifnim mishur sadin. Again, we have here an example of legislated lifnim mishur sadin. That is what Mar Shmuel is telling Rav Yehuda. Ki hada avur de Shmuel. He's going to show an example of lifnim mishur sadin. Ashka chanach chamri b'midbara. He found donkeys wandering around in the desert. Ve'adrinu l'marayu l'basar treisa yarchi. 12 months later, the owners came and gave him a siman that they're his, and he gave it back to them. Why? Lifnim mishur sadin. Okay, he's giving an example of how somebody behaves lifnim mishur sadin. Rava havishakal v'azal batre de Rav Nachman b'shuka de gildai, the leather markers, ve'amr le b'shuka de rabbanon. These are marketplaces that the assumption is that the owner's miyayish because it's Rabbi Mitzuyin Sham, and you're not going to be able to get it back. So Amar le Matzah kan Arniki Mahu Amar le Harei Shalo. Ba Yisrael v'Nasan Basimin Mahu Amar le Harei Elu Shalo. Ay v'halo Ome v'tzoveach. He's standing there screaming, "It's mine! It's mine! I'm giving you a siman. You see that I lost it, and you see that it's mine, and you're not giving it back to me." Answers the Gemara, Nasa kitzovecha beito shenafa v'alsfinoso shetava bayam. A guy's boat is sinking in the middle of the ocean. Okay? Now, when it sinks, the divers are allowed to go down and get all the treasures, whatever. The guy said, I'm not miyayish. Very sorry, your house is falling down in an earthquake. I'm not miyayish on my house. We don't pay attention to that. Okay? So therefore, it seems to be two different opinions here. Do I have a chiyuv of lifnim mishur sadin or I don't? Okay? So we've seen enough Gemaras that we can now already see the Tosfos. 1 second. No. First, I want to open. Let's open up the sheets, if you will. Let's go. Let's open up the sheets first. So the sheet of there's a Mordechai on Ot Reish Nun Zayin. You see the Mordechai Reish Nun Zayin. I don't have my sheets. I don't know the order of the sheets that I gave it. It's probably the second sheet. It's probably on the middle sheet. Mordechai Bava Metzia Reish Nun Zayin.
Yeah, it's on the sheet which starts with Maharal Chidush Agodos, and the Mordechai is like the fourth item, mamish in the middle.
Okay. You know what? Let me just pull up. I have a printout that's not the same.
It's on the first page.
So you said it's Os Reish Nun Zayin?
That's what it says. It's Mordechai
Okay.
Yes, right. It's the fourth. Yes, it's the fourth source on the first page. Yeah. Okay. Mordechai on the fourth source on the first page. Okay. And then wait a minute. What did I do here? Yeah. Okay. I see. We're gonna be skipping around a little bit. Anyway, so Daf Chav Daled Amud Beis. Motzakan. He quotes our Gemara. Amar lo tarti. Amars harei elu shalo. V'hadar amars chai la'achzir. He's explaining what's the kasha of tarti. It's a contradiction. On one moment you say harei elu shalo, and then you got to give it back. Amar le lifnim mishur sadin. V'ashkach nami beperak hagozel basra. Chayiv bebal lotzes yedei shamayim. Kibin de chazin and have kaifi lehu hachi kedeisa sof perka omnin gam anan kaifinin leme'eved lifnim mishur sadin. We'll have an example there where we force. That was the Gemara of the guy who broke the barrels, and Rav made him give back. Rabbi Rachani made him give back the shirts, and then he made him pay wages. He forced lifnim mishur sadin. Im hayecholet biyodo lasos. This is going to be an important word. That we force lifnim mishur sadin if he has the financial ability to do that. The Tani Rav Yosef Odatam Lehem Es Haderech. Lam Rav Yochanan Lo Nech Rav Yushalayim. We're going to see this Gemara next. Okay. Ela B'Shvil Hamidu Divrei Al Din Torah. V'Lo Asu Lifnei Mishur Sadin. Yerushalayim was destroyed because they didn't do Lifnei Mishur Sadin. We're going to see that's what we're going to see the explanations of why that's true. And Nasa Kitzovech Al Beiso Nira Rav Yah Hadalo Kaifin and Hasam Lasos Lifnei Mishur Sadin. So he has a very simple question. In the first case, we forced Lifnei Mishur Sadin. And in the second case, he said he's screaming that his house fell down. Why aren't we forcing them to Mishur Sadin? You have to understand that's a contradiction between the Amoraim. We don't want to make a machlokas. So instead of making a machlokas, we're going to change the scenario. Efshar shahamotze haya ani ubalaveda haya ashir. That if the finder was a poor person, all right, that the finder was a poor person, and the loser was a wealthy person, we don't force lifnei mishur sadin. We allow the main din to stand. I hope you're hearing the import of this. You have to realize then the default is we go din. We are going to force lifnei mishur sadin. But we don't force lifnei mishur sadin when there are mitigating circumstances to say, you know what, it's more appropriate to leave it on the din. How does that resonate with you guys? Because this is Paskin in Shulchan Aruch. Okay, is that if the loser is wealthy and the finder is poor, then we don't require lifnei mishur sadin. But if they're equal, or they're both wealthy people, they can both afford it, we force the finder to return it. And we'll see why in Tosfos.
One of the things that the Torah tells judges when they're listening to a case specifically and clearly is not to favor an osher over an oni or an oni over an osher.
Who's going to answer that question? That's a great question. Who's going to answer that question?
I didn't. Can you repeat it?
There's a din that judges are not allowed. Right? You can't favor a poor person because he's poor, and you can't favor a rich person because he's rich. So why doesn't this contradict that? Josh.
Because this isn't a system of din. This is a different system.
Exactly. Ephraim, that's in din you're not allowed to. But here what we're saying, in din, 100%. But the question is, do I activate lifnim mishuras hadin? Okay? And then they can activate lifnim mishuras. And we're going to see that there's an idea that the judges have the power to force lifnim mishuras hadin, which is what we saw about Rabbi Bar Bachana and the broken barrels. Rav forced him to lifnim mishuras hadin. We'll see when is that appropriate. That's going to be this Tosfos, famous, very important Tosfos we're going to have here. But maybe what we need to do is first see Daf Lamed. In fact, before we see this Tosfos, we'll just jump, since it's all in Bava Metzia, we're going to see Daf Lamed in a minute. Okay? But this is clear, and it's going to be Paskin in the Shulchan Aruch about an Aveda, specifically in the Din of Hashavas Aveda. You know what? Let's hold this Tosfos for a minute and just jump to Daf Lamed, which was already alluded to in the
Again, if the loser is a poor man and the finder is a rich man, then we are, telling the finder to do lifnei mishur sadin.
Even though the loser was miyayish already.
Even though the loser was miyayish. Exactly. I just didn't hear that right.
Exactly. Okay, let's go to Lamed. We saw this, but I want to highlight a specific thing, a specific pace. If you remember, the case was Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi was walking, and there's this guy who had the load of wood, and you got to reload it, okay? And the Gemara says Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi really could have been pater because it's zaken bein al fichvodo, and the Gemara says that he went lifnei mishur sadin, right? He went lifnei mishur sadin. Okay, you guys remember that Gemara? Zaken bein al fichvodo, Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi lifnei mishur sadin u'da'avad, and we had the brisa of odatim lahem, etc. So now let's go to the two dots because we want to analyze the psukim that require all of these midos halachos. Amar Mar.
What a midar? What?
Lamed Amud Beis, 4 lines before it gets wide. Amar Mar. Yelchu ba, right? V'hodatem lahem. That was the pasuk was v'hodatem lahem es haderach asher yelchu ba. So the Gemara makes drushes. Yelchu ba zev bikur cholim, because of the idea of going. Right? I'm sorry. Yelchu Yelchu ze bikur cholim. Hainu gemilus chasadim. Frankly, Gemara, bikur cholim is the same as gemilus chasadim. Lo nitzuk el ben gilo, because there's a disadvantage to ben gilo. The Amar Mar ben gilo notel echad mishishim b'cholyo afilu achim miboy le'lemeza legabei ba. Okay, so there's an idea that the Torah is mechayev bikur cholim through a special din. Gemilus chasadim So that's stam. Bikur cholim is gemilas chasadim. But there's a disadvantage to a ben gilo, again, Kabbalistic stuff. There's a disadvantage to a ben gilo to go and be mavakir cholim. And the pasuk of Yelchu is mechayev you even ben gilo. All right. Again, I don't want to get sidetracked on that point. Okay?
Well, what is Ben Gilo?
A person who's born under the same what's
Mazel?
The mazel, yeah. Again, I don't want to get sidetracked on that. It's not part of our sugya, okay? But it says continues. So again, the pasuk was odatim lahem et haderech yelchu ba. So zu yelchu ba zu kvura. That he also has to do it. Asher yasun zu lifni mishuras hadin. The final word, Asher yasun, they have to do lifni mishuras hadin. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan lo chaver Yushalayim ela shadanu ba'din Torah. Frag the Gemara ela dini de magista ledainu. What are they supposed to do? A mafia dinim. Might makes right. So we have this pasuk here telling us that we have to go lifnei mishuras hadin, and that was the pasuk that they activated. Now go back to the previous Gemara. That was the pasuk that they activated for Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, that even though he was a zaken ve'eno lefi chvodo, he behaved lifnei mishuras hadin based on this pasuk of Yelchuba. Okay, and that's what we're going to see. So Tosas is going to tell us we've got numerous psukim, and maybe we'll see the Tosas, and then we'll get into the hashkafa of that with the Marshan and the Maral on this Gemara. But we'll leave the Maral for the moment and see the Tosfos, and then we'll get to the Maral next time. So going back to Tosas Chavdal Amud Beis, this is the main Tosfos in the whole sugya of Asisa Yasher Vatov. Lifnei mishuras hadin. So me Asher Yasun. We just read the pasuk Asher Yasun, which is what Rabbi Yossi, which was what was quoted to justify Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi to behave lifnei mishuras hadin because of Yelchuba. Tema lo maisi kra hacha kidemaisi lekama. We have this case, right? And Rabbi Yehud and Mar Shmuel and Rabbi, they said you got to go lifnei mishuras hadin and return it. That was what Mar Shmuel said. What pasuk did he quote? What pasuk did Mar Shmuel quote when he told Rabbi Yehuda you got to return it lifnei mishuras hadin?
V'hodata.
Could you show me where it says that on Chavdal Amud Beis? This is a quasi-trick question, but this is Tosas's question. Mar Shmuel told Rabbi Yehuda, you got to behave lifnei mishuras hadin, and he didn't quote any pasuk. Says Tosas, Tema, lo maisi krahacha, kidemaisi lekaman, be'uvda de Rabbi Shmuel, uva hagozel kama, which we will see afterwards, be'uvda de Rabbi Chia, the Mara dinner l'shulchani. We really should have seen that already, but we'll get to, it was in Bava Kama, so we'll see it next time. There's another case where we demand lifnei mishuras hadin based on psukim. V'nimtzara lekaman b'sof perka umnin maisi kra achrina leman telech b'derech tovim. In the case of Rabba Bar Chana and the barrels, what pasuk did Rav bring? He brought a different pasuk. He brought a pasuk of leman telech b'derech tovim. Shehimi divrei Kabbalah. So here we have no pasuk. In the case of Rabbi Shmuel, we brought a pasuk of Laman Yelchu, and in the case of Rav with the barrels, we brought something from Mishlei. We didn't even bring a pasuk from the Torah. We brought a pasuk from Mishlei. Right? Why did he have to run to Mishlei as a pasuk Asher Yasun, which is exactly what we bring on Daf Lamed? Again, you got to understand the problem. We have three places where the Gemara activates V'asisa Yasher V'hatov. Our Gemara here about the Aveda, no pasuk. We have a few cases like Rabbi Shmuel, and we have a couple of other cases which we'll see in other cases where the Gemara always activates Laman Yelchun. And we have the case of the barrels with Rabbi Bar Chana where he made them give back the shirts and pay the wages, and we brought a pasuk from Mishlei. So again, I want you guys to feel the problem here.
I don't
One case
understand
has
why.
no pasuk. One has a pasuk from the Torah, and one case has a pasuk from Mishle.
It should
I don't
all bring
understand
the
why
pasuk
we.
from the Torah.
Well, Daniel, what'd you say? And then we'll hear. I
It
think
should all bring Vasisa Ve'ashar. It should all bring. There should be some unanimousness there about this.
Excellent. Go ahead. What do you want to ask, Dan?
I asked,
Oh.
we're talking about a case where we're not talking about the Oraitas, right? We're saying that Rabbanan came up with this. So Rabbanan don't have to find a pasuk in the Torah for a Darabanan.
So what? But what? But here they didn't find any pasuk.
They don't need.
Rabbi Shmuel, they found a pasuk in the Torah, and in Rabbi Chana they found a pasuk in Mishle. Why?
But they didn't. But they didn't need those.
Oh no! No! That was not a good response, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't need it, they don't need to bring it. Let's start here. Why didn't we bring a pasuk? You just stop. You could say Lifnim Mishur Sadin. Where'd that come from?
I mean, we have many Darabanans, right? So I'm not even understanding where the question.
Wait, again, just a minute. If every place there would be no pasuk, you'd be okay.
Right.
But you can't tell me in one case they bring this pasuk and in one case they bring another pasuk. There's got to be some kind of a hierarchy in the legislation.
I accept that. Okay.
So look what Tosfos says. This is fundamental. Says Tosfos like this. V'yesh loma lo maisi kra da asher yasun ella b'makom she'acherim chayavim v'hu pater. Other people are chayiv. Let's take the case of the coins again. We'll have to see that Gemara. I'm sorry we didn't see it yet, but we have our case of Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi, where everybody is chayiv to help the guy. There's a din you have to help a guy, except Rabbi Shmuel had an exception because he's a zaken ve'ena lefi chvodo. So what we're doing is he has an exception from the basic din. So there we say, right, then Rabbi Chiyav delo boy lemelav potter. V'lifnim mishur sadin shilem. Again, we'll see those cases. We know the case of Rabbi Shmuel b'dezaken eno lefi chvodo. Then havi v'asa lifnim mishur sadin kamo acherim. So all he did is he treated himself like other people, and that's the pasuk l'man yelchud. Okay, what about in our case? So in the case of returning the lost donkeys, which was the case of Lifnim Mishur Sadin, who's chayiv to return donkeys after 12 months?
No one.
Nobody's chayiv. So here's the difference. There are cases where you have a personal exception because of your circumstances, where you're an exception to the basic halacha. Then we need a pasuk. But when nobody is chayiv, and you do it, kule alma pturim lekach lo maisi krohacha. There's no pasuk. Umikol makom lifnim mishur sadin boila adure kiven she'eno mischaser mamona. We don't need a pasuk. We say, you know what? It doesn't cost you anything. It's appropriate for you to do a sisa yasher vatov and return it lifnim mishur sadin. So lifnim mishur sadin, when everybody is pater, when everybody is chayiv, you need a pasuk. It's a pasuk that requires you to behave like everybody. But when nobody is chayiv, that's an even bigger lifnim mishur sadin. That's a svara only because you don't lose anything. Aval besofa umnin bahanu shkulai, the broken barrels sheshaver lo achavis va'asu lo hefsed gadol. Mishum lifnim mishur sadin ein lo lahafsid lekach ma'isi kra laman telech. That where if I would behave lifnim mishur sadin, I'm going to lose money. That requires a higher level pasuk. That requires something that's on a more higher level. You have to behave on even a higher level. All right, it's late now. We'll come back to this and review it, and it will be helped with the Rishonim on this from the sheet. Okay, so we'll pick this up on Wednesday from here, and we'll see the other Gemaras, but we'll have the sheets first to talk about Daf Lamed and the Maharal and the other Hashkafa issue of again, the issue is, why was the Beis HaMikdash destroyed? Because they didn't go Lifnei Mishur Sadin. There are lots of reasons why the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. Why is the Gemara talking specifically about that? That's what we'll see on that on Wednesday. Okay?
Sure.
All
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.